So you want an SUV that will hold 7 people better than a bus, fit a whole couch in the back, and tow like a freight train. For some jobs, a Highlander or a Telluride just won't do the trick. But these two, they're the best big boys you can buy.
We're Edmunds, and we test hundreds of cars each year on the road and at our private track, so you get the most trusted reviews. If you want to know which car, truck, or SUV is the best, then stick with us.
This is the new Expedition. It starts at around $65,000 and it can go all the way up to almost $90,000. But what you pay depends on dealers in your area, and we have the tools to tell you what you should pay. The links for these two cars are down in the description, or you can just hit the QR code. When we tested this thing last year, we were super impressed with it. So much so that it actually went to the top of our ratings and rankings for big 3-row SUVs. Let's see if we were right and how it stacks up almost a year later. Check this out. The steering wheel buttons have no markings on them. That's because when you rest your thumb on one of the button pads, a little screen pops up and tells you what to do. We have this Expedition in our 1-year road test fleet, and we're all getting kind of used to it, but for some that could be pretty annoying. There are a couple of changes in the Expedition though that really aren't as successful. This row of physical buttons moves as one when you click it, which I think just feels cheap. And also, you can only control the outside lights via the touchscreen menu, and the little knob down here is for your drive mode. Now think about it, what are you using most often, your headlight switch or the drive mode controller? I think they should be reversed, and this is actually quite a misstep from Ford. Now, the tech implementation in here is mostly great. Ford goes with this dual screen approach, and there is this huge display up front that makes it really easy to see information at a glance, like your speed, the driver assistance systems, the maps over here off to the right, and a customizable widget in the middle, which you control via the central screen. Now, that second screen, it is where you do most of your controls for the car, and it is surprisingly easy to use. It's snappy, responsive, crystal clear, and it's a really easy, simple setup. It's not just tech for tech's sake. Also, I'm really comfortable up here. The seats are covered in this nice soft leather, and there's plenty of adjustment in them. This is a huge SUV, and you have just as much space to move around as you might expect. I also really like the material choice and quality inside the Expedition. Ours is a fully loaded platinum model, which means there's nice materials all over the place, and I really like that everything feels soft to the touch and sort of high quality. The only place that you'll find scratchy, messed up piano black plastic is this little bit right here, and I think I can live with that, especially in comparison to the Jeep. There is also a ton of space for your stuff inside the front of the Expedition. The center console actually slides backwards to reveal a massive bin here. It's a perfect place for a small bag or a purse of some kind. We actually have the optional lockable box, so you can put some more valuable items in there and stow it away with a little combination so nobody can come in and see what you got hidden down there. Also, the center console is enormous, and the door pockets are divided so your stuff doesn't go rattling around all over the place. I like that. You also get good storage for smaller items like your sunglasses. Both the Wagoneer and the Expedition have a little place for your sunnies up there. You get this little rollback compartment with a wireless charger in here, 2 USB ports, and some pretty decently sized cup holders too. Look at that. Whether you're buying gas or electric, check out bumper.com. With just a VIN or license plate number, learn about a car's history quick. Find out how many owners a used car's had, where it was registered, and more. To learn more, visit bumper.com/Edmunds. You know, I think I'd rather sit back here. These seats are nearly as comfortable as what's up front, and you have a ton of space back here. You also get your own independent set of physical climate controls, 4 USB ports, 2 in the back of each seat, and a household outlet for charging. With huge door openings and side steps, it's actually really easy to get inside or load a car seat. Just keep in mind that it's really high up, so you're gonna have to hoist that thing in here. There is no air suspension to lower the car like there is in some rivals. The Expedition does earn bonus points for having its air vents in the ceiling. That's going to be more comfortable for most passengers, and it's going to be a lot better for reaching kids in rear-facing car seats. Also, there is a lever. When it comes to third row access, there are some things that we like and some things that we don't. It's nice that it's just a simple button push to move the seat out of the way instead of a strap or a heavy lever, and because the seat moves as one piece, you can do it with a car seat installed. However, when you put the seat back down, it doesn't remember its position, and that means the second row passenger has to adjust it manually. That's gonna be kind of tough, and we wish it would just do it by itself. So it's pretty easy to get back here, and once you are in the third row, yeah, there's a decent amount of space. You also get a few amenities back here, like your own set of air vents in the ceiling, 2 USB-C ports either side, and yes, you can in fact electrically recline the third row. The space back here is why you would buy a truck-based 3-row SUV like this instead of something smaller like an Explorer. You can actually haul people and gear in relative comfort. That said, I still think the Grand Wagoneer does this a little bit better, and I'll show you why later in the video. At the back of the Expedition, my favorite thing about it is pretty obvious. It has a split folding tailgate, which is perfect for things, you know, like tailgating. It's also got a household outlet, 2 USB-Cs, and a 12-volt socket back here, in addition to these adjustable dome lights so you can always see what's in your cargo bay even at night. Also, you can lower the second row electrically, and you can lower the third row and pop it back up, all with the touch of a button. When it comes to actual cargo space, as you can see, the Expedition is gigantic. It's still got a little bit less storage on paper than the Chevy Tahoe, but it's still more than an Armada and a Sequoia. Also, one bad thing about the split tailgate is because it juts out a little bit, it's going to make loading bigger things a little bit harder because there's an extra foot or so that you have to reach in. But beyond that, it's cavernous and you're not gonna have any trouble loading all your junk in the back. On the road in the Ford Expedition, we've said it once and we'll say it again, this thing rides great, especially for something so large that's based on a truck platform. It rides even better if you get it with the adaptive suspension that's standard on the King Ranch model and available on this here Platinum. It's super planted on the highway. Wind and road noise are kept to absolute minimums overall. There's none of those weird frequencies or resonances that you get because it is based on a truck and the body is on a frame. And because the wheels aren't too big, you don't get any of that float or any of that weird wheel hop that you do get in something like the Navigator we tested a little bit earlier that had 24s on it, which are just too large. The 22s in here, just fine. Now we have to talk about the steering wheel. The flattened out top and bottom give you more thigh room down here and a better view of the screen, but how is it while you're on the road? The fact of the matter is, it doesn't bother us as much as we thought it might. When you're going straight, it's perfectly fine. When you're merging, it's totally normal. The only time it can get really awkward is when you're going for slow speed maneuvers, like 3-point turns. Or, for example, if you're pulling away from a stop and you have the wheel cranked and you let it feed back through your hands, that's not so great. Now on to the engine, and the power plant in the Expedition is great. Both of these SUVs feature turbocharged 6-cylinder engines, not the big V8s like you get in the Tahoe or the Suburban, but I'm not missing the extra displacement here. The Expedition's power plant is super strong. You always have a bunch of torque low down when you need it, and there's plenty of confidence for when you're merging or passing or, you know, getting onto a highway and getting up to speed. Also, the transmission is really nice. It shifts very crisply. There's no driveline shunt when you're pulling away from the stop. Overall, it's a really smooth, really torquey and full experience. You're not gonna miss the V8. And when you are sick of driving, you always have Ford's BlueCruise, which is their eyes-on, hands-free driver assist tech. It only works on highways that have been pre-mapped by Ford, but when you do get to turn it on, it is super confidence-inspiring. It keeps a very nice tight gap to the car in front of you, and it keeps you dead center in the lane that you're in. Every Expedition comes with the hardware necessary for BlueCruise. It's just that on lower trims, it's a subscription, but you do get a 90-day free trial, so you can decide if you like it or not. Also, in a big old bus like this, you get plenty of driver assistance systems like lane keeping and blind spot monitoring. Those both work great, but one thing I want to point out that the Expedition has that the Grand Wagoneer does not is a blind spot camera that pops up when you turn on your turn signal. Because visibility is at a premium in cars this big, having that little camera right there that pops up in your display is really, really helpful. Hyundai has been doing this for a while, and so has Tesla, and it's nice to see Ford jumping on the bandwagon of something that is just so, well, crucial almost when you're driving something so large. The Expedition has a ton going for it, and we're really glad that we bought this one for our 1-year road test fleet. But for certain buyers, the Grand Wagoneer might be even better. Speaking of the Grand Wagoneer, this is Jeep's answer to the Tahoe, the Sequoia, and that Expedition. It came out in around 2022 and starts at around 65,000 bucks. This one is almost 85,000. For 2026, the Grand Wagoneer got a pretty significant refresh, but the big news is that they cut the price by almost $30,000, which means instead of competing with an Escalade or a Navigator, it now competes with the Expedition. That's a big deal, and that means that it's a better value for money overall, but the details are really where it starts to slip. Make sure you have your microfibers handy. There was just too much piano black plastic in this interior. It just feels cheaper and not as modern as it does inside the Ford, and stuff like this just gets scratched up in here anyway. When it comes to the screen in the center of it all, it's fine, but it's definitely nothing to write home about. The problem really is the software that runs behind it. It looks like 2 generations old at this point, and the app store is borderline innavigable because there is an app for basically every single function. Also, this background, I don't feel like the rest of the interior has any resemblance to a slab of marble, but okay. Audiophiles will know what Macintosh is, but unfortunately the system in the Grand Wagoneer just isn't really that good. Also, the rest of the software just feels very jumbled and not that well thought out. There are redundant controls for the heated and cooled seats here, and there are also apps for that. It just doesn't feel as nicely thought through as it does in the Ford, but at least the Jeep gives you a ton of USB ports, so you will never be fighting over chargers. There is, however, a bright spot in here, and that is the row of physical climate controls, which I love. You also get some pretty nicely labeled and easy to read buttons on the steering wheel. These capacitive buttons up here aren't as reliable and often get very smudgy, but on the whole, it is a more usable cabin than you'd get in the Ford. These seats are super comfortable and really nicely padded, and they offer a ton of adjustment. We had multiple testers with multiple different body types drive this car, and everybody was able to find a comfortable spot to sit in. Also, in both of these SUVs, you get a nice commanding view of the road. Another benefit of something as large as the Grand Wagoneer is there is a ton of space to put things. You have a huge center console, about the same size as you would in the Ram. You also have this little slidey cubby here for something smaller and thinner. There are 2 cup holders, which aren't as big as we would have liked. It only fits something around this size, but you also get a small cubby here for like a phone or a wallet or keys or whatever. It's worth noting that also the door pockets in the Jeep are not as useful as they are in the Ford. So if you carry around a bigger water bottle, you're out of luck when it comes to the Grand Wagoneer. Like in the Ford, you get power running boards in the Wagoneer, so getting in and out is pretty easy. Also, there is a ton of space back here. I got great knee room, I got tons of headroom. I'm perfectly fine. The seats are also pretty comfortable, even if we give the Ford the slight edge there when it comes to rear seat comfort, but I think I'll be fine back here for more than a couple hours even. The rest of the second row is a bit of a mixed bag. I like that I get my own console for all the climate controls, and you get tons of USB ports and even a household outlet. But a couple of things we don't like is the extension of all this black plastic and the fact that the air vents are in the side here and not in the ceiling. If you have a kid with car seats, ceiling air vents are going to be preferred, and the Ford has that when the Jeep does not. Overall, we still give the edge to the Ford, even if the Jeep is a mighty comfortable place to be. Before we hop into the third row, I wanted to point out one thing, and it's these buttons here. You can electrically operate the third row from the second row, and that's pretty rare and something that I think families are really going to appreciate. Don't see that every day. It'll come as no surprise that there is a ton of space in the third row because the Grand Wagoneer is massive, but one thing it does better than almost every other 3-row is the fact that I don't feel anywhere near as claustrophobic thanks to the size of this rear window and the fact that I get my own sunroof. There are also a ton of amenities, like I get a USB-A port and a USB-C port on both sides, cup holder, and my own air vent, and I can electrically recline or move forward the third row. That's pretty cool. One thing I noticed is that this just doesn't open high enough. If you're any taller than me, you're gonna have to duck. But there are a couple of other things about the back that you should probably know. Like, for example, that with the second and third rows up, the Jeep has more cargo room than the Ford. But if you fold all of them down, then the Expedition has the edge when it comes to cargo space. And there are a couple other neat tricks in the back of the Jeep to make life a little bit easier. A couple of other niceties in the back of the Grand Wagoneer. You can electrically operate all of the rows from right here, which you can also do in the Ford, and you have a little cubby space underneath this false floor. However, you only get a 12-volt cigarette lighter outlet in the back of the Jeep, where you get an actual household outlet and 2 USB-C ports in the back of the Ford. The ride is pretty good most of the time, but every now and then when you hit a sort of pothole or something more dramatic in the road, you get this side-to-side head toss, which is something that we don't really experience in the Ford. It also feels like the Grand Wagoneer doesn't recover from those bumps as quickly as the Expedition does. The Grand Wagoneer also feels much bigger on the road than the Expedition does. We know that both of these cars are closer to sumo wrestlers than they are welterweights, and we don't expect sports car-like handling from either, but the Grand Wagoneer always reminds you of its size and weight. If you're going up to the trailhead or you're going on a ski trip, it's going to wallow around on itself and sort of be more floaty, and you're going to feel the sensation of its size and weight more than you would in the Expedition. Visibility out the front is also somewhat tricky. These super thick A-pillars and massive side mirrors mean seeing out this way is just frankly very difficult. It's going to make low-speed maneuvers and things like parking lots a little bit trickier, and also sometimes it'll block a pedestrian. That's how big they are. I will say, however, visibility out the back is a lot better than it is in the Ford, at least naturally, because of how much glass you have back there. In the Ford, however, you get that helpful blind spot camera, and you don't get that in this. No camera pops up in the instrument cluster, it doesn't do that, but you do get a 360 camera to help you parking. Now, there is a conversation to be had about this engine. Right off the bat, I'm going to say that it feels perfectly fine. it's more than strong enough for merging or passing. But the issue that I have with it is the transmission tuning. It just doesn't feel all that solid. It doesn't always seem to find the right gear, and when it does select a gear, it'll sometimes smack you in the back of the head with a just like rougher shift than the Ford ever does. There's something in the powertrain tuning here that makes it a little bit less refined than we would have liked, especially for something that is the Grand Wagoneer. The reason for that is because this car used to compete with the Escalade and the Navigator, and it used to have 120 more horsepower, slightly different tune. Because this now competes with the Expedition, you get a lower horsepower version of the Hurricane Straight 6 that's under the hood. So the Grand Wagoneer has gone from something that was class leading in terms of power to something that is good but far from exceptional. The Grand Wagoneer does include most of its driver assist systems as standard, and you can get a version of Jeep's highway hands-free drive assist system in the Grand Wagoneer. This car doesn't have it, but we have driven it in the past. We don't like the execution of this system as much as we do BlueCruise, but it does keep a nice tight gap to the car in front, and it does keep you very neatly centered in your lane. On longer drives, you're going to be very thankful that you can just keep your hands in your lap and your eyes on the road, but it's worth noting that you can't like hop in the back or do something silly like play on your phone. There are cameras that are watching your eyes and making sure that you're paying attention. The Grand Wagoneer has some good ideas, and it is pretty much unbeatable if you are towing or putting somebody in the third row, but it's those little details that might cost it the win here. Before we get into value and deliver our verdict here, if you had any questions or think we missed anything or have any videos you want us to do in the future, feel free to let us know down in the comments. I promise you we do read them. Also, if you did like this, a like and a subscribe totally goes a long way. Neither of these cars are cheap. The Ford starts at over $65,000. That is a lot more than a midsize SUV or a minivan that can carry the same number of people. That said, the Ford feels like it's worth the money. Base cars are loaded with tons of standard features, and even at the top end at nearly 90,000 bucks, we think the Ford is well worth that kind of spend. Yes, you can get a base Navigator for that kind of dough, but we actually like this car better. The Jeep is a tougher sell. This particular car's base price is very close to its as-tested price because there aren't that many options on it, but a Grand Wagoneer will top out at over $100,000. That is Cadillac and Lincoln territory. And even at that price, regardless of how much money you spend on the Jeep, it still feels older, more creaky, more plasticky, and just sort of outdated when you compare it to the Ford. Ratings and rankings for these two cars and all of their competitors are always available at our site, and we update them all of the time.
Let's take a look at the scores. The Grand Wagoneer's excellent space gives it a strong showing in storage and cargo, but even with its new, lower pricing, the design and materials keep it from scoring highly in value. The Ford's excellent tech features, flexible storage solutions, and all-around top-notch experience give it wins across the board. The Ford Expedition comes in with a very good score and takes the #1 spot in this test and in our rankings.
The Jeep is going to be right for you if you need more cargo space while carrying people very often, you use that third row all the time, or you do a lot of towing. But for most people, we're just going to recommend the Expedition. When it comes to tech, the way it drives, how comfortable it is, this thing is the class leader. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.